leader of the band Queen, the legendary Freddie Mercury, left behind not just one of the greatest fortunes in music, but also thousands of fans worldwide. Better known as Farok Bulsara, he sought solace and distraction in his passion for painting during his final days. His refuge in art helped him face the inevitable, which is why he asked his closest friends to accompany him on a tour of his mansion at Garden Lodge. Assisted by Terry Giddings, his bodyguard and driver, Freddie was helped down the stairs. Illness had already taken over his body, sapping his strength. The last recording sessions, driven by substantial doses of substances to alleviate his weakness, were already a thing of the past. Now weakness prevailed. He could hardly move, and his vision was nearly compromised. With an infected foot, the pain became increasingly unbearable. He had given up on treatment, merely keeping himself sedated enough to minimize the suffering, aware that even with all the medications, only palliative care could offer relief. Under the care of his close friend Mary Austin, his partner Jim Hutton, and his personal assistant Peter Freestone, after announcing his health to the world, Freddie passed away. The story of Freddie Mercury's final days reveals hidden details and factors that led to an outcome some had already foreseen. If you want to understand it better, I recommend watching until the end, diving into a journey through time that begins in Middlesex County, near London, in 1962. At that time, at the age of 16, Freddie started his first jobs to earn extra money, working as a shop assistant in the neighborhood. However, his true motivation was music, becoming a fan of the band Smile, where Brian May and Roger Taylor played, a crucial connection that would reveal itself years later. In 1969, he joined the group Ibex as a singer, making his stage debut on August 23rd. His stint with the band was brief, and he then moved on to Rage. During this period, he composed songs, including Stone Cold Crazy, which would later become a hit with Queen. Despite this, success did not come, and the financial situation was not ideal. Sharing an apartment with Roger Taylor, both worked at a clothes and painting stand in a nearby market. Their music work hours extended into the late hours of the night. However, Freddie did not give up. Responding to an advertisement in a magazine at the end of 1969, he became the vocalist for Sour Milk Sea. Again, the experience was short-lived and unsuccessful. However, Smile, May, and Taylor's band found themselves without a vocalist, and in April 1970, Freddie joined them. At that moment, musical magic began to emerge. Besides the evident musical influence, the change of the band's name to Queen was a crucial contribution from Freddie. When asked about its meaning, he never hid the gay connotation in the name. Another significant point was the change of his surname from Bulsara to Mercury, inspired by the song My Fairy King. During this time, he met Mary Austin, who became a significant figure in his life, maintaining a relationship that lasted 6 years, despite emotional distance in the late decade. Nonetheless, Freddie always referred to her as his wife. Let's rewind once again. Although Queen made their debut at a charity concert for the Red Cross, it wasn't until 1971 that the lineup truly solidified with the arrival of bassist John Deacon. That same year, the band embarked on their first tour in England. A group was consolidating, and Freddie Mercury not only proved himself as the ideal frontman for Queen, but also showed that his degree in art and design was not in vain. The iconic logo, an emblematic image that accompanied the group for years, was his creation. He used the royal coat of arms of the United Kingdom, composed of the 4 zodiac signs of the band members and the 2 lions representing Roger and John, under the constellation of Leo. There was a crab in reference to Brian May's sign and nymphs corresponding to Virgo, Freddie's sign. In the center, a huge letter Q, and above it, an impressive phoenix rising from the ashes of previous bands. Perhaps vision, perhaps coincidence, but something was certain. Freddie Mercury was ready to make history. Jumping to the following year, in 1973, the self-titled album Queen was released. However, it's interesting to note that before this release, Freddie Mercury had already recorded versions of 2 songs, I Can Hear Music and Going Back, by Dusty Springfield. These tracks were part of a musical project by the Trident label, and to avoid confusion with his recent leadership in Queen, Freddie released them under the pseudonym Larry Lurex. What followed is pure rock history. After the release of the album Queen in 1974, Queen 2 came out in November of the same year. Next, Sheer Heart Attack was released in 1974, positioning them internationally. But it was in 1975 that the band released A Night at the Opera, the album that catapulted them to fame as superstars. Songs like My Best Friend and Love of My Life, composed by Freddie for his love Mary Austin, as well as Bohemian Rhapsody, became an indelible part of their repertoire. It's worth noting that contrary to what is portrayed in the 2018 film of the same name, it wasn't just one executive who denied the band the opportunity to record the song Bohemian Rhapsody, but several producers who avoided the risk due to its considered overly long duration. Fred proved them all wrong with a unique and stunning composition that didn't go unnoticed by anyone and is still listened to with the same passion today. Speaking of passion, Freddie quickly gained a reputation due to the excesses that fame and success brought. The well-known motto, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, seemed to be taken to the extreme. The Queen's leader didn't hesitate to spend considerable amounts of money, even going so far as to send private planes to pick up friends wherever they were. At Freddie's parties, renowned guests like Elton John, Mick Jagger, or Rod Stewart frequented. Champagne and cocaine were never lacking, and the legends surrounding these celebrations were numerous and varied. It's said that these parties could last up to 5 days, with the hiring of prostitutes and male escorts to please the guests. Dwarfs circulated around the hall with trays on their heads containing lines of cocaine ready to be snorted. One of the most legendary events was the 1985 birthday party, where he rented a venue in Munich and hosted various guests at the city's Hilton Hotel with a black and white theme. He wore a decorated vest in the corresponding colors with a military-style coat throughout the party. Cinema cameras captured the moment, with the idea of using the footage for the video of Living on My Own, and for his solo work, Mr. Bad Guy. Outside of recordings, there was much material to be edited, and it became clear that for Freddie, the concept of "let me entertain you" went beyond a simple song. If we track Freddie's musical career, we'll find important details that help better understand his story and his tragic end. After the success of A Night at the Opera in 1975, came the albums A Day at the Races in 1997, 6 News of the World in 1977, with the iconic We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions in Jazz in 1978. The new decade began with the album The Game in 1980, when Freddie was already established with his new look, definitively abandoning long hair and growing a mustache. This aesthetic change coincided with the style of male homosexuals known as Castro clones. During this period, rumors about his sexuality were diverse, but Freddie often responded to journalists' questions with sarcasm, keeping his private life separate from his music. After the release of the album Hot Space in 1982, the band took a break, and each member dedicated themselves to individual projects. In Freddie's case, he began working on his first solo album at Musicland Studios in Munich and collaborated with Giorgio Moroder, recording what would become his first solo track, Love Kills, used in the soundtrack of the restored film, Metropolis. In April 1985, the world met Mr. Bad Guy, released by CBS. The records, reception, and songs I Was Born to Love You and Made in Heaven were later remastered on the album Queen Made in Heaven, released after Freddie's death that year. In one of the most iconic events, Queen performed at Live Aid, a famous concert organized to raise funds against famine in Ethiopia. The group stole all the spotlights with a spectacular performance considered one of the greatest in rock history. Another iconic milestone was Queen's show at the first edition of Rock in Rio in 1985. Led by Freddie Mercury, the band performed on January 11th and 18th, attracting a record audience on the first day, with 300,000 people. 1985 was a significant year not only in Freddie's artistic life but also in his personal life. In the previous year, he attempted to flirt with a man at a London club but wasn't recognized. Later, they had a successful second encounter. That man was Jim Hutton, an Irish hairdresser who remained by Freddie's side until his final moments. In 1986, they celebrated an informal wedding ceremony as they couldn't legally marry and had a honeymoon in Japan. We arrive at 1987, the year Freddie met the Spanish soprano Montserrat Cabal, an artist he deeply admired and saw as a super diva. Initially, they planned to record a song together, but the chemistry between them was so intense that it resulted in the release of the album Barcelona in 1988. While for many it seemed that success and happiness surrounded Freddie from all sides, his boyfriend Jim Hutton stated that he was diagnosed with HIV after Easter in 1987. Nevertheless, Freddie continued his music career, although his health deteriorated gradually. This decline was visible in his appearance, and the press speculated about his health. The last time the public saw Freddie Mercury on stage was in Barcelona on October 8, 1988, at the La Nit Festival, where he sang along with Montserrat the song Barcelona, which would become the official song of the 1992 Olympics in the city. During this period, with Queen, he had released The Works in 1984 and A Kind of Magic in 1989 and 1991. Despite the noticeable decline in his health, Freddie Mercury continued to record and work with the band he loved so much, contributing to the albums The Miracle in 1989 and Innuendo in 1991. His last public appearance was on February 18, 1990, during the Brit Awards ceremony. Brian May spoke on that occasion and gave a brief speech, while Freddie, thin, pale, and without a mustache, approached the microphone and uttered a "thank you, good night," which would become his last public words. During this period, the press no longer speculated but directly asserted that Freddie Mercury was very ill. His bandmates and friends created a barrier around him to prevent information leaks. On November 22, 1991, accompanied by Jim Hutton, Freddie made a brief trip to Switzerland to visit a property he owned in the country. However, they quickly returned to Garden Lodge Mansion, where the pain, lack of energy, and failures in his body were evident. Concerned about his final image, his bandmates and friends created a barrier around him to prevent information leaks. On November 22, 1991, accompanied by Jim Hutton, Freddie made a brief trip to Switzerland to visit a property he owned in the country. However, they quickly returned to Garden Lodge Mansion, where the pain, lack of energy, and failures in his body were evident. Freddie had planned as well to avoid disputes after his death. He left his entire estate to Mary Austin, the great love of his life, and named her as the executor to ensure his wishes were respected. He also left specific amounts to his boyfriend Jim Hutton, his assistant Peter Freestone, his cook Joe Vanelli, his driver, and bodyguard Terry Giddings. Furthermore, part of the copyright of his songs was allocated to his mother and sister. Recognized as the leader of one of the most important rock bands of the 20th century, Freddie Mercury became an icon and a grand artist. The mystery around his ashes remains. Some theories suggest they were scattered in Lake Geneva in Switzerland by Mary Austin, while others claim they rest under a large oak tree in the Garden Lodge Mansion. With such an imposing legacy, it's evident that the show must go on. Before we conclude, I suggest checking out a video with equally interesting stories. If you don't want to miss content like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. Best wishes to all.